Hey, what's up guys? Adam back again with RV Returns for our next Blitz tech. So we got this one straight from Twitter this week with this fire water kind of like Vikings Final Fantasy II type deck. It was super interesting, so we decided to go ahead and try to tackle it and see if we can improve that deck. So let's go ahead and look at his cards that he has, and then we'll look at the improvements that we're going to make and kind of show one final deck list and hope to improve upon the deck that he initially had. So let's go ahead and start with the first set of forwards. So first up we got Layla. So she's a Final Fantasy II forward that kind of works well with this deck. So she's going to let us grab a Viking back from the break zone and just put it onto the field for free, which is kind of great because the Viking that we want to abuse that with is the Opus 4 Viking. So when he comes into play, we draw a card, and when he leaves the field, we draw another card. So really, with this deck, the idea is we're just going to play Vikings a bunch of times, and that's how we're going to fuel to play our other cards later, just by having a bunch of cards in our hand and just use these guys as like chump blockers later on. And if they get through for damage, you're feeling pretty good. Then lastly, for this set, we got Americ. He has a minion on his card. He doesn't receive damage less than his power. And then when he attacks, all forwards you control gain plus 2,000 power until end of turn. So I thought this card was pretty interesting in the deck, actually. He buffs your smaller guys by 2k after he attacks, so it lets your kind of your weenie guys get a little bit bigger and maybe party attack to be threatening instead of just kind of sitting there at 2 and 3k. So, I mean, these are pretty interesting. I think Layla and Viking are super core to this type of deck if we're going to stick with the Rebels with Fire Water, as well as kind of try to use the Vikings there. So for the next set of forwards, we got, I want to call this like the Final Fantasy II package. So first up, we got Guy. He's brave, and he gets plus 1,000 power for each Final Fantasy II character you control other than Guy. And then when he dies, you get to activate all the forwards you control. So he's actually a centerpiece of this deck, I think. And I think it's kind of cool the ways that you could use this card in this deck specifically. Next up, we got Furion. If you control a Job Rebel, he costs 2 less. Guy's a Rebel, so Guy's the one you really want to use to get that discount. If you can drop Furion for 2, it's going to be amazing. If your opponent controls 3 or more forwards, he has 1,000 power and haste, also great. And then the last one I think is what we're also going to try to abuse here is to break a backup, and then he gets First Strike and Brave. So this allows you to break backups that normally just can't be broken on their own, make space for new backups, or just get use out of cards that normally other cards can't get use out of. After that, we got Gordon. He's another Final Fantasy II character, just a great blocker as long as he's out for a turn. Really a powerhouse in the Knight Prince deck. Not so much here, but he does count toward Guy, which is nice. And then we got the Emperor. Not much to say here. Card's really good. Shuts down a lot of plays that your opponent might want to make. And also counts toward Guy, which is pretty cool. So next set, and I think this is kind of where the deck starts to get a little all over the place. So we got 2-drop Tifa. She's a haste, 4k. 2 CP Lednar. He's a really annoying blocker to deal with early on. Just a great fire card. I really like this card. I don't think it sees enough play. And I think that's probably mostly because it's a fire card, but yeah, I think it's a great card. And then we got Kamlanot. You know, pretty familiar with him. He's pretty staple in a lot of decks. So I mean, at this point, like now we got like a cheap haste guy. So we're trying to go like hasty. We have like an annoying blocker, but Vikings kind of already do that. You don't really care if they die. And then you're using Kamlanot, and we have like some backups and other things that we can search out with him. But we got to remember, like, we don't want the deck to get too clunky, and I think this is kind of where the deck goes off the rails a little bit, and where I think we can see a ton of improvement. But these are all good cards, don't get it twisted. It's just, I feel like they don't necessarily belong in here. So again, here's some more cards where I just feel like we're trying to be a little all over the place, and we're not really sticking to, like, one thing that the deck should just do well, or just a couple things. So we got Go-Go and Feral Chaos. Now, these two cards do combo extremely well together. If you can get Feral Chaos in the break zone, your Go-Go is going to have all its keywords. However, in this build, we have 1 Feral Chaos and 2 Go-Go, so it's not like super reliable. We do have Kamlanot to search out Feral Chaos, but we don't really have a lot of ways to discard him ourselves, so we're really kind of relying on our opponent to let us discard, or our hand just gets so big that we just move to discard and discard him. However, it's just not super reliable. Also, when Feral Chaos hits the board, or if you like have to play him, it just doesn't feel good having to KO things every time, even if it's your Vikings that you get to draw cards off of, because I would rather use those Vikings to block something that my opponent's trying to do. So it's not that great. I don't really like it, and it also kind of clashes with the fact that we're running backup Chaos as well, because you can't have both these on the field at the same time. So next up we got the summons. First up we got Blitz. Again, probably the best fire summon in the game. It's really good. However, in this build, I don't know if I particularly like it too much, but it's never bad. It's just a great card. Then we got Fairy. More card draw, can activate it forward. It's pretty good. But again, I think we have enough of that going on here. We don't really need to run Fairy. So I think it's kind of just overkill, and we don't really need the extra cards because we draw tons of cards with Vikings. And then we got Fanfrit, which I really like in this deck. So Fanfrit lets you sack a forward, and then they have to sack a forward. It gets around like no break effects, you know, because you're putting them in the break zone. They're not breaking per se. So you can do things with like, I'll kill my Viking, and you have to kill the guy that you actually care about. Or I'll kill my guy and ready all my guys, and you have to still kill one of your guys. So there's a lot of really cool things you could do with this in this deck, and I really like this card. And then to wrap out the summons, we got 4 CP Bahamut. It's a pretty good removal, but again, I feel like it's not really needed in this build. But it is a decent removal card, and you can get that removed from game, which is nice. And then I went ahead and stuck Cleone here just because it might as well be a summon. He's running 2 Cleone. Again, I don't like Cleone much here. I don't like Cleone in any decks that actually runs a decent amount of summons, so I'd rather just pitch it, like just get rid of it and put it another card. I actually don't like Cleone if you're running summons at all. Like, I think that's just the thing. Like, if you're going to commit to Cleone, you just shouldn't even run summons. And most of the time that's really good in like a mono water type monster build. But here I just really don't like it. So let's go ahead and get into the backups. So first up we got Opus 2 Astrologia. Ready's a guy. Pretty nice. Again, I feel like it's a little overkill. It's decent though. Like, if you're really worried about ice, this is a good card to have in your deck. Then we got Bard, 2 fire, break, all your stuff gains 2,000 power, but you can only use it during your turn. I actually like a card in the new set over this card, just because we have Furion able to be able to break it instead. So I'm not a big fan of this card either. Then we got Chaos. So if we're running Kamlanaut, it kind of makes sense to run Chaos. However, I don't really like Kamlanaut that much here either. So, and also it clashes kind of with your Fear of Chaos theme a little bit. So it's decent. It's not terrible. And then we got Illusionist. I love this card. I think this is maybe the best fire card coming out of the new set. Well, not quite. I mean, the legendaries are obviously really good, but they're kind of like forced you into certain archetypes. I think this guy you can just slam in any deck that runs fire, and it does something that's unique and really good and cool. So I do really like this card a lot. And then for the rest of the backups, first up we got Red Mage, staple fire since the game's been out. Just a really good card. Makes sense that it's here. Summoner, another really good 2 CP water backup. It's amazing. Can really counter summons in a pinch, or just force your opponent to not be able to play their summons until they have like 2 that they can cast, or try to bait this out. So it's a really good card. Then next up we got Minwu. It's not great in this deck, but it does count for Guy, which is awesome. And if Guy and Furion are getting big, it allows them to block a lot without dying, which is nice. So it's really just for those 2 cards. It doesn't really come into play much with like Vikings and stuff per se. And then last we got Hilda. So if you're playing a lot of forwards out, she is going to draw you a pretty good amount of cards, but she does cost 6 and it's pretty steep. It makes sense here because you're going to have a lot of cards in your hand to be able to pitch to play stuff, but then you're just going to draw them right back when you play this. So I'm not a huge fan of it here, but it's not terrible. And I do think it could work in like a more Viking focused deck, but with what we're trying to do with like kind of the rebels and the fire stuff, I think it's a little bit better. This does count for a Guy, which is nice, but still it's kind of comes at a steep cost. Alright, so here's the cards that I'm looking at taking out. So I took out Tifa. She just didn't really fit the theme of what we're trying to do. I feel like we don't need like a little small haster person. It doesn't really make much sense. Lednar's an annoying blocker, but so are Vikings. So again, kind of didn't make the cut. Go-Go and Feral Chaos is a fun little package, but I feel like you have to design more of the deck around that. You need to run Moogles and such, and I just didn't want to commit that much of the deck to Go-Go and Feral Chaos. I ended up cutting Aymeric just because he's kind of a bit expensive. I do like what he's doing here, and I do think I would like to toy around with him more, but in my initial build, I would probably cut him. I cut Kamlanaut here just because if we're cutting all these dark cards, it doesn't make as much sense to keep him around. Emperor is really good, but we don't need to run Kamlanaut to run Emperor, so he didn't make the cut. Went ahead and cut Belias because, again, we're not really trying to get haste. Our guys aren't that big, so first strike's not that great. And we're running Minwoo anyways, so if we can just get bigger than them, it doesn't really matter that much. And Furion and Guy can do that. Cut Bahamut as well. Sometimes 8K is just not enough. So I don't really want to spend 4 CP when I'm not killing anything, killing something important. With Fairy, there's just other better ways to activate, and I'd rather run other summons in this deck rather than run Fairy, and we have enough card draw. Cleone, again, we're running summons, so I think Cleone is pretty bad. So I don't really even think I would think about running it in this deck. Astro is a good 2 CP backup, but I don't think we really need it here. Bard, I think there's just better cards. We're cut Chaos because obviously Kamenos getting the axe. Summoner was a hard one to cut. I do like Summoner a lot, but there was some other 2 CP backups that I really wanted to put in its place. And then Hilda, I think she's just too expensive. So yeah, let's go ahead and look at the cards that I'm adding in. So actually I want to start with my additions with the summons just because it's important for me to show you at least one summon that I'm putting in so that it makes sense the forwards that I'm adding in. So first up we got Phoenix. This lets you recur 3 CP forwards and deal 8K to something. I'd rather just have this over Bahamut, and it lets me recur things like Vikings and other things that I'm about to show you. And then just Opus on Leviathan. Sometimes at the end of the game, it just removes something out of the way, and sometimes when it comes off the top, it's just really good. Bouncing has become a little bit less good recently just because there's so many good ETB effects, but if it's going to win you the game, it's going to be great, and having that EX burst is also really nice too. So next up, we got the forwards that I'm changing. First up, we got Opus 1 Viking. I think it's just good to have an extra Viking card for Layla to get to in case you don't see Layla and your Opus 4 Vikings. So it's kind of just there for some room for cushion. It's not super great. Ideally, you want the other Viking every time, but just in case, it's here. I put in playset of Ashe. She's just really good, really reliable card. Kind of does a lot of things that your other activated cards did, except you just play Ashe now and she helps you in the ice matchup. She's also just really good in general and hard to get rid of. And then I put it in Cognazzo just because you can do some tricky stuff. A lot of our forwards are water forwards, and even our backup line is kind of like half and half. So just a small power reduction could be great. You could Phoenix this in and then kind of use this to kill a 10k or something like that, as long as you have 4 water creatures. It can also stack with the last card we have, which is Cloud of Darkness. So again, it's power reduction here. We're going to have usually like 3 to 4 forwards out anyways, so a lot of times she's going to come in and kill something and then make it hard for your opponent to block the following turns. So just really good in general. And then the last set of forwards we got Vivi. He's just a really good Phoenix target. Not much more to say. He's just a good piece of removal with the body and get you something on board to block with, kind of like your Vikings, except he's not drawing your card. He's just going to kill something. Then we got Zell. He's just a tech card for me. He's a one-of. I just like the fact that it gives you a little bit of flexibility, lets you kill a monster, or maybe deal 4k to something that blocked a Viking so you can get rid of a 7k, things like that. And he's got haste so you can swing the turn he's coming out, which is also really nice. And then lastly, this is just kind of a personal spice thing. His 3 CP Opus 5 Black Mage. This guy could be really good at the end of a game. You just kind of slam him down and then break him, and now all your Vikings kind of become semi-unblockable. It's a lot harder for people to block them. So I just like it. It's just a one-of, and it's kind of a cute play that a lot of people won't really be expecting. And then we're going to the backups. So first backup I put in was Gladiator. It just makes sense. It recurs your Vikings back. So it kind of like, once Layla brings it back, and then you can bring it back again with this. It just does so much, and you can play it early and kind of just do it later. It's pretty great. Then I put Wrestler in just because I have Ashe in. It makes Ashe a lot harder to deal with. Again, you can play this guy early, and it's awesome. He doesn't do much more, but if you have to, like later in the game, you could potentially break him with Furion to make space for something else. Then we got Sid 11. I know we make fun of this guy on our page a lot for his doofy face, but he actually has some pretty solid effects. I think most of the time you're going to be using that plus 3,000 power, and then you can break this to Furion to play another Sid 11, which is pretty good. And then sometimes he just digs through your deck. Maybe he can put something in the break zone for you to Phoenix back later, which could be awesome. So I just think overall he's pretty good here. And then lastly, we got Thornton the 7th. EX Burst, search for a card, but then when you break him, you get to draw a card. So a great target for Furion to break, and also can just get you a card from your deck when you need it. You can get that Layla to return your Viking. You can get that Furion to play on the board. You can get your Guy to play on the board. Just a lot of things you can do, and it can let you play around with a lot more one-ups. Yeah, so that's basically the deck and the changes that I would make. I think this is a really cool idea, and I don't even really think that the deck that I have here is the most optimal. I think you could even further improve upon it, and I kind of want to toy with it more myself. So let me know what you think of my changes. Like, favorite, subscribe, all that jazz, and thanks for listening. See you guys later.